Now, back in Comp 4, this is a low-quality version of my Cinema 4D scene that I did in Cinema 4D Lite, Cinema, where here that goes with After Effects. So these are just basic camera moves. Now with my TIE Fighter scene, down the line, I would just scale up and scale down, put it in a 3D layer so I can change the XY axis to kind of fake a certain perspective and kind of skew things around a bit. I think I mentioned this earlier. Now I did a little bit more changing the color. It might be hard to see any changes. I just changed a little bit more of the color balance in the reds here. With the Rebel logo here, it was originally more orange, so I wanted to kind of make it more of a dark red, just to kind of match what it might look like in outer space. You know, I'm assuming things might be more blue in outer space. At least it is in the Star Wars world. And of course in the movies the TIE fighters appear more blue, so that's what I wanted to do here. This is where I added a force motion blur, just to give it a little bit more blur as it moves past the camera. Now I've got a mask layer here. I made a second copy of the TIE Fighter. And what I was trying to do is get rid of some of the glare that's in the windows. You know, the windows of the plastic just picked up way too much of the highlights, or way too much of the light. And it just looked unnatural. It looked a little silly. And I really want to get rid of this thing that's in the middle of the model. I guess it's the console that the TIE Fighter pilot would have been behind. Again, it just looked too bright and unnatural, too much like a model. So brought all that down, really darkened the levels. So that's all I did with that. Now, what I did with this, since this is pretty much perfect, I mean, the way it's going to be in the final, I went in and rendered it as a .move file. I could have pre-comped it, but like I said earlier, I just like to lock everything into position as a .move file, have it all rendered, and just, you know, put it in and pre-comp it down the line. It gives me more freedom, and I don't have to take a risk of losing a composition and the system crashing, basically, which has happened to me before, and I've lost compositions from that because I'm notorious at not saving. You're supposed to save often. I have to admit I don't do that. It's got me in trouble. So that's how I work, at least. You guys probably do it as a pre-comp, and that's fine. Alright, I don't have this linked up with Cinema 4D Lite, although except the only thing I did with Cinema 4D Lite is here with one of the earlier versions of the model. I couldn't finish the renders in Cinema 4D Lite because there were a lot of textures that just they couldn't import into Cinema 4D Lite, because I have to do this on another computer because I don't have the full version of Cinema 4D Studio on this computer. So I had to do it elsewhere and had to just import all that on an external drive. You don't need to know all that. But for me, some of the textures just would not show up again. And when I took it out of Cinema 4D Lite, the scene out, brought it back in to Studio, the textures were gone. They wouldn't link back up. And so I had to spend all this time linking all the textures back up. Even though they were still in the native files, they should have linked up. But I don't know if it's something that I did or if it's just the way Cinema 4D Lite works. Those particular textures just didn't come back. So when I brought it back up onto my other system, saved this Cinema 4D file, it overwrote everything for Studio, and I couldn't bring them back in without having to individually link everything back in. It was a hassle. So I just did it outside of Cinema 4D Lite and just rendered everything in Studio. what I did after I fixed all this, I added a little red light in the cabin here just to kind of give it something, you know, is that there's a light in there. You know, it's a TIE fighter, there are red lights inside. And so what I did, I tracked that. I did some tracking with the cockpit light, I should say, not cabin light, but the cockpit light. Just did some basic motion tracking, blurred that out. So motion tracking, position, scale, rotation. Brought down the opacity on it. And then at this point it was out because it's, you know, the light doesn't need to show up at this point because it's pretty much a side view. Now, what I added down the line is I added some of the lights on the back of the TIE fighter and tracked those with a null. And all I really did is I just hand did this null because I found that it just looked better just to kind of hand move it because it's moving so fast. It really seemed to move better without. See, here's the lights that I added. It's nothing major in the final comp. I mean, you really don't notice it anyway. It doesn't show up this bright. It doesn't show up quite that brightly, but I think it looks pretty good. Let's have that in the background so you can see it a little better. So I just had a null, match that, very close, kind of to some of the brightest areas there. Again, I could have probably motion tracked it in After Effects, but it was easier this way. Because what happened is that it started motion tracking a lot of the pixelation, so it got off the track very easily. It started good, but then down the line it started going off in some weird place. I thought, you know what, it's easier just to do this. It doesn't have to be so precise because the ship's moving fast enough, you're not going to see it. If there's any variance or wiggle or something. Because at this point it's going to be very small in the final comp. So that's what I did to kind of just add this, jazz it up a bit. Now I'm predominantly done with the TIE Fighter. There are a few other things. Let me get to that later. And now we're going to go to the Cinema 4D Death Star part of the project.